Welcome to the Wolf Mother podcast. My name is Dana Harkis, and as always, we will begin with 3 deep breaths. So wherever you're at, you can close your eyes down, you can keep them open, but we'll take a deep breath in through the nose, softly out of the mouth, in again through the nose, softly out of the mouth. Last time, deep breath in through the nose, hold it at the top for a moment, and let out a nice little sigh. Today we have Kelsey with us. Would you like to introduce yourself and let us know what's going on in your world, what you do, what you have as an offering right now, and then we're going to jump all into it.
Oh my God, Dan, so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. We have been wanting to do an episode for so long, so I'm so glad to be here. Okay, my name is Kelsey Tetzlaff. I am from the States, spent a lot of time in New York. Now I am living in Mexico City, but the last 3.5 years I have been nomadic, and I am a life coach, a content creator, and a marketing specialist that helps artists and creatives thrive, create stability, and use practical ways to stay grounded within the chaos that is entrepreneurship and creative living and, choosing an unconventional path. Right now, one-on-one coaching is still a thing that I do, and I work with artists to create solid foundations, but I also work with different creative businesses in the content creation space and the marketing space, both locally here in Mexico City and all over the place. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for carving out the time to be with me. I know we've wanted to talk on live specifically for a while, so I'm really grateful that you were able to carve out the time so that I could put this onto my podcast. It really means a lot to me. Kelsey is also the most adorable little model for those of you that don't know and don't already follow her as well. I love seeing you utilize like fashion and beauty in a way to also be expressive in terms of just life in general. So I feel like that's also important for me to name, because I feel like I get inspiration when I see you post those types of things as well. And when I do think of you, I do think of practical practices, practical magic. I love what you share with everyone, whether that's in your love letters that you send out weekly or all of the other content that you just have, out in the world, because I think that a lot of times when people get on this journey, whether it's like, I'm going to go into my spiritual journey or I'm going to go into my nomadic life journey, people get really overwhelmed. There's so much information on the internet and in life in general, and people kind of spin out. Whereas I love that you hone it really back in. You bring in the beauty of simplicity to people's lives. So you said something that was so beautiful. You wrote the words literally, finding internal stability in external chaos. And so I really want to start this conversation off by asking you, what made you go into nomad life and what made you realize that you needed the internal stability, even though you were probably still enjoying the external chaos?
Right. Good. That's an excellent way to start off the conversation. And just quickly to, going back to fashion and beauty and all that, like something that I really believe that I want to speak here is, as artists and creatives, we are literally able to shift and move and adapt. And we're not just good at one thing. Like there's so many different ways to express yourself. There's so many different ways to pursue your art or to pursue your creativity. And so listen, so I had a career in New York City as a personal stylist while I was working in social media and kind of starting to learn about the wellness, personal growth space as an industry. So I was doing all of that already. I was kind of already teaching meditation classes, like practical mindfulness for New Yorkers was like my go-to when I first started leaning into the coaching and teaching space. And with Nomad Life, it was around COVID. I had just, this is a whole other story that will another time maybe we could dive into, but in the beginning of 2020, I was living in Guatemala with the circus. Long story short, I also grew up as a dancer, right? Creatives were all these different things. And so I was living in the circus, or was living in Guatemala with the circus for a month. And then I went to Costa Rica to Envision Festival and was like, whoa, like this is so amazing. I'm in this really floaty spiritual space that you're discussing, and I had already wanted to kind of break out of my New York life, and then COVID happened. And I was like, okay. So I lost like all my jobs. I started saving all my unemployment money. And I was in a relationship as well that wasn't working. And we had been together for a long time. We had a house, we had the dog, I had the career, I had all the things. But something was just missing. And something from traveling to Latin America, which I know you and I both have such a love for, it was like something in my soul was just like, I got to get out of here. And I need to leave. I need to, there's another level of life waiting for me. There's another opportunity for me to step into myself as a leader, as an entrepreneur. At the time, I was sort of starting business stuff, but I wasn't really, it wasn't grounded. I was very much learning. So I utilized my time during 2020 literally to study, to establish my business, to get mentorship, to start teaching online, to start playing with things. And ultimately it was just sort of like it had to happen. Like there was nothing else I could do. There was nothing left for me in New York. And so I ended up leaving early 2021 and beginning that nomad journey. I don't remember the last question you asked me. Oh, the internal stability. Listen, I mean, I think it's a relatable concept for anybody, no matter what lifestyle you choose, whether you are an entrepreneur or creative or, and you're wanting to pursue a path that is led by your gifts, or whether you're just a person, like you do have a 9 to 5. There's nothing wrong with that. There's always going to be chaos in the world outside of you. And nomad life, you're like willing to experience a level of freedom that is very unpredictable. You're moving places a lot. Your environment is changing. The bed you're sleeping on is changing. The people you're around, the culture, everything. And so pretty much immediately I knew, because I was going through so much with just COVID, right? Like we were all going through a lot. I knew that the through line that needed to take me on this journey needed to be a level of self-trust, a level of self-groundedness that I could be anywhere and still adapt and be fine. I had to start cultivating that before I even left. And it has taken me through until now, which we're 3.5 years later. And now I'm kind of in the transition of settling down into Mexico City, but I'm still not fully settled. Like it's a journey. So it definitely requires you to know yourself to an extent to where you can move through all these different changes and environments, especially if you're building a business at the same time, like I was, which was crazy. So there's a level of that I think has to happen.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you so much. I feel like it is really important to name those things. And I shared this right before we started recording that I feel like Dylan and I, with the plant medicine journeys that we lead, a lot of people do plant medicine and then they are so interested in that nomad life. But just something as simple as that I can relate to over the last 3 years, the bed you're sleeping on changes. And that's a really big thing for people that I also did not take into consideration when I was like, yeah, I want to go here, there, and everywhere. I want to have fun. I want to experience new cultures, new people. And yes, that is exciting. And it does really push you into a growth spurt. But it's also important to remember that when we aren't supported in that space by ourselves, it can get really difficult. So I think the question that I want to ask, because I know something for me, when I have moved many places, is that I have my altars that travel with me. And some of them are really small. Like people, I think, envision that we always have these big altars because of what we do for our retreats. But my personal travel altar is very tiny, but very important and serves a purpose. So I would love for you, if you could, or realistically, whatever the fuck you want to talk about. I don't care how you respond to my fucking questions. I just want to hear you talk. But in terms of having support systems in place for when you are traveling, what does that look like for you as someone that teaches people practical magic I'll use?
Yeah, great question. Okay, listen, when I first started Nomad Life, I had a huge altar. I was convinced that I needed so many physical objects. And I think this happens in the spiritual journey in general. You kind of feel like, I need my tarot cards, I need my this. The thing is, you actually don't need any of it.
Yeah.
Like I'm the same as you. I have a few little crystals I travel with. You know what I do have though, that has kind of acted like a travel altar is and I have it right here because I'm traveling next week, oddly enough. I have this little bag. It's a leather passport bag. It has my passport, all that stuff, but it also has all these like little post-it notes and like cards from people and things I've collected along the way. And I've found that even if I don't put it out in an altar, that actually has been a tool that has helped me a lot. And I've recommended it to a lot of my clients who are traveling or wanting to, or are just nomadic in nature. So having a little travel pouch actually physically has been good, but it's not like I learned pretty quickly that what feels best is to travel as light as possible. Now, I'm like a fashion girly, so like, you know, that's been tough, but it really teaches you to kind of let go of attachment to a lot of the physical items that and material items. And I think spiritually, it's like you start to understand if you're not traveling with all of the things that you can tap in at any time with yourself.
Mhm.
You can connect to spirit anytime, wherever you are. You're looking at the same moon, you're taking the same breath, right? The air might feel different. Okay, cool. But yeah, so like I wasn't traveling with like a yoga mat. For a while, I was traveling with my hula hoop, but that got out of hand quickly because it became a problem on flights. So, practical things that I would bring. Yeah, my little travel pouch, but other support systems were just like knowing because I was working. It's not like I didn't come from like a trust fund. It's not like I actually was convinced I could not be nomadic for a while because I was like, well, I don't have like this endless bank of money. And there were a lot of people I met on the road that did. And that's great. But I had to find other ways of being resourceful, not only to like live, but also just to, feel centered and connected. So some things I would do is just establish routines and habits that I would kind of take everywhere and I would let them evolve and change. But number one thing for me is journaling. Like my journal is life. It is, the thing I do every day, multiple times a day. So having a little journal, waking up in the morning, making sure to journal, taking even just a couple deep breaths in the morning. And yeah, since I was working, what I would do, especially when I was in Colombia, which was a wild time, I had like no money. I was like running out of all my savings I had saved from COVID. And I was like, my business isn't really like doing super well. I'm new, it takes time to get used to this kind of thing. So during the week, I would book Airbnbs or hotels that were where I could have my own room and my own space. That was huge for me. And then on the weekends, I would stay in a cheap hostel and go have fun and party or whatever, right? So maybe those routines of meditation and journaling aren't as easy, but yeah, support systems of just trying to establish something and then working with my reality of what needed to happen, which was I need to focus Monday through Friday or Monday through Thursday. And then I can cut costs and manage my finances and stay in a hostel on the weekends. But in those 4 days, I'm going to be on top of my routine. So whether I had a towel, I would just lay it out, do some stretching, go for a walk, like these things are easy. You can do them no matter where you are. And they're going to help you. They're going to help you more than they're ever going to harm you. Right. So those were some of the tools that I would use. What else? I mean, yeah, just, having my little ways of organizing my clothes in my suitcase, like having, just like down to that. Cause like you said, with nomad life, you don't realize how sleeping in a different bed every night can affect you. And I've realized the last couple of months, oh my God, as I've become a little more stationary, how burnt out my nervous system has been from much change. So there is a dark side to this, right? It's not like all fun and games. But also another thing I didn't consider for a long time was having the amount of time it would take to pack my things or to physically travel or the toll it would take on my body. So even just being like, okay, tonight is the last night in this little town. I'm going to have a little packing party. Like, I'm just going to make it a vibe, go get some tea, put on some music, and just have my little routines of even packing, just enjoying that process. Yeah.
I love all of that. I can relate to a lot of the things that you said. And I love that you brought up the point of earlier on, you said something about people having trust funds when you're traveling. And it's so funny because recently I've said quite a few times, I'm like, I feel like, shout out to my family because obviously like they made me who I am, but like I feel like I got fucked. Because there are some people traveling out here that I'm like, damn, like it's not taking as much of a toll on their nervous system as certain things that are affecting Dylan and I because finances aren't a problem. Because
Right.
going to a place where they're like, oh yeah, I could just go back to this place and I have a family's house there that I can stay at. And Dylan and I are kind of like, okay, that make obviously in the back of your mind, if you know you have those safety nets, it allows for this experience to be that much more, I guess maybe like exciting and cozy. Cozy is really the word I want to use because it's still exciting for Dylan and I, but there are things that are less cozy. When we look at our bank accounts at times, when we were living in Mexico and I got really sick
Yes.
and he was
Oh,
like,
oh my God. Yeah.
it health is a huge thing that comes into play. And for me, I can also, just to like really resonate with what you're saying, simple things like having a journal, you can get a journal anywhere you go. Simple things like taking a walk, you can walk almost, right? Because sometimes we stay in certain cities where we're like, all right, tonight is not the night for a nighttime walk.
Yes.
um, but most of these things you can do. And I've even I love that you brought up putting a towel on the floor to do stretches because I've talked about that in terms of like teaching yoga asana, where I'm
Yeah.
like, you don't need to have certain props to still sit down and do your yoga practice, right? Your asana practice. Let's be realistic. Also, I have a pouch that's over there. I was going to get up and get it, but I'm not going to get it now. But I have a little pouch that is my little travel oasis. And when it comes to the altar spaces, and like this is like kind of dipping into the like spirituality conversation,
Yeah.
it's hyper consumerism that we think we need all this, especially when it comes to like, I know you like also have stood in Colombia and stuff, like even like when people come here and come to Peru, they want to buy every altar cloth, they want to buy every single bag, you need every fucking chicapa. If you don't have 8,000 rapes on your altar, then you must not be a real medicine person. But
Right.
the reality is like you do this stuff to have a calm inner center.
Yeah. It's a channel.
Exactly.
It's just a tool. It's not the thing. And yeah, for me, like I even just one little thing of Palo Santo, just to carry it with me is nice.
Mhm.
Little light at night, like it doesn't have to be this big thing. And yeah, and that's the point, right? Is that
Yeah.
we're already, we're humans having this amazing spiritual, or we're spiritual
Mhm.
beings having a human experience.
Yes.
Like the point of nomad life, I think what it does is it really just strips you down. It's not about buying more things. Also, adding more in your bag is just not practical,
Nope.
right?
Nope.
And yeah, you're right. It's to go outside and just take a breath and look at the stars, or even with yoga, like I've taught courses on just like 5-minute daily easy self-care practices or daily
Mhm.
routines. That was really like the center of my teachings over the last couple of years because I developed all these little ways to connect with myself. And one of the things, really, speaking of yoga, was being in bed, just doing 5 minutes of bed yoga, like waking up, rolling out your neck, do a
Mhm.
child's pose on your bed. I mean, you can do that in a hostel, you can do that on the grass outside, you can do it
Mhm.
in the airport, right? You can do it in your bed, like these, or putting your legs up the wall
Yep.
for five minutes. Like there are so many ways, and yeah, I think it's an important conversation about the hyper consumerism and the glamorizing of it, because there's really, I mean, even if you do have like a trust fund or something, there's no shortcuts to learning how to do nomad life and learning what type of
Mhm.
nomad life works for you. Like I had
Yes.
every few months I was going to my mom lives in Minnesota, my dad lives in Seattle, my sister lives in Seattle. I had family in Florida as well. And I was kind of just popping between those for little breaks to ground and to save some money and to reevaluate, or to, you know, my mail is getting flown all over the place. My clothes are in like 8 different closets. Like, you need moments to recalibrate. And so I'm grateful that I had safety nets in that way, where I could at least stay somewhere for free once in a while, just for a couple weeks. Because I, like you, I know you got really sick, but last year, I don't know, I had been traveling for 2 years, and for whatever reason, this final year, I was getting parasites. I was getting flu. I had just everything you could imagine that was not too serious. UTI in the mountains of Colombia, you know, like it's tough. And those are the moments you really gotta like get resourceful and trust yourself and trust the people around you and ask for support and still do the things to stay centered among all of it, so that you don't lose your goddamn mind, you know?
I love that, because it was so something that traveling has taught me is that I had a conversation with my grandmother. Love this woman. She is like 90 now. But she asked me a question about having children. And I said to her, Catherine, I wouldn't have a child and raise them. I'm from Staten Island, in New York. And I was like, I wouldn't have a child and raise them in Staten Island. I just don't think it's a good place to do that. And she just asked why. And I explained, well, you know, when I got really sick, so I got bit by a mosquito, for those of you that don't know, that gave me dengue fever, West Nile virus, and Lyme. The Holy Trinity. I am God's favorite. You can't convince me otherwise, because who else? You must be God's favorite to get all of that at once. So I got very sick, was in the hospital for a month. And the thing was, I love my friends and I love my family and I love where I'm from. However, I received more actual hands-on physical and then emotional support from my random neighbors in my cute little town in Mexico. Of course, obviously the doctor was extremely concerned, but he was very hands-on about the whole experience. He wanted to explain everything. Every other day he was taking blood just to see, like, things that he didn't really have to do. He was like, but I think we should take this precaution anyway. And then down to, I lived in an apartment above a cafe, and the people downstairs in the cafe asking if they could get anything for me or Dylan, because they're like, we see Dylan going in and out all day, because he's trying to make sure that you're okay. What can we get for him? What can we do for you? The woman that was my landlord, she had left when I originally got sick because her mother had passed away. She came back and immediately made a big soup for Dylan to take into our apartment, because she was like, she needs to be replenished with good nutrient. Like, they were just so kind and so loving. And then I did fucking go back to New York, because my doctor and I were convinced, oh, if you go to New York, you'll be able to get better care. One, I have a problem with the medical system. I've always had a problem with the medical system, but that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
But two, the support I have received from traveling to different places. And I also don't want to knock the whole US, because I do feel when I stood in New Hampshire, they were much more community oriented. I didn't stay in a city, but like they also understood the importance of routines and habits, because you have to care for yourself, but you also care for your neighbors in case something goes wrong. That was kind of like a side tangent that I felt was really important that I've learned, is the support that you realize is in other places in the world that I didn't grow up around. And it's still not like that in Staten Island. Love Staten Island for what it has. But if you're looking to have your neighbors take care of you in times of trouble,
no way. Yeah. You know, I think it's an important thing to bring up, because it speaks to a couple of things. Yeah, we don't need to knock the whole US, but there is certainly a more individualized mentality there. And here in Mexico City, I've found community wherever I've been. Like, it's been pretty natural to me. But here's the thing, because the first thing is, yeah, there's definitely a community mentality in Latin America, from what I have gathered. When I have gone through hard stuff here, when my friends now that are we're more like a solidified community here in Mexico City of both foreigners and locals, and we take care of each other. It's even my neighbors, even the guys who ring the bell and I bring out the trash here in Mexico City, I feel like they have my back. I feel like the guy at the laundromat has my back. I feel like, you know, and that is a little bit different. The thing I'll say that you do that kind of comes into play with this, I think, too, because that was one of my biggest fears going into nomad life, getting sick in another country. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
That's scary. And there is a level of safety. There's little things like little rules I have in my head. We could dive into it in a bit if you want, of just like my safety rules and boundaries, because I feel like that's been also a real, like the reality of traveling. However, something that it's helped me learn is how to trust myself more when I've been in these kinds of situations. You have to ask for help. And as people who are givers, right? You're in the medicine space, plant medicine space, you're in the coaching space, you're an artist, you're a space holder of some kind, you have your own business. You are a giver, you are a holder of something. And for a lot of us, I think it's really hard to learn how to receive. It's really hard for me personally, I continue to learn and be humbled, you know, to believe that you receive the same support that you're giving. I think it's just a thing with coaching. I love giving coaching support, and now I know how to, you know, work with how to choose certain clients that I know I'm going to be uplifted after our sessions, right? It's like another conversation more on the business side of things, but it's been a journey for me to learn how to receive. And I think actually the obstacles that you come across while traveling that are inevitable. It could be your health, it could be your safety, it could be just some weird situation that you need support with. A few weeks ago, I had these guys come into my apartment that were exterminators, but it was a scam. Okay, I've seen this before in my life. These guys come into my place. I think that they're exterminating cockroaches. I found out it's a scam. They tried charging me like $200 USD. I'm like, what the hell? Okay. So for instance, I call, you know, a friend of mine who's Mexican. I let my neighbor know, who I happen to know as well, a friend of a friend, to come over and help me with this. You know, you learn how to be, you learn how to ask for support, and you learn on a deeper level that you are worthy of receiving that support. And I think from Nomad Life, that lesson can trickle into so many other areas of your life for your own healing, for your own personal advancement. So yeah, that's something that reminds me of, is like, people are willing to help. Most people are good people. Trust your instincts when you feel like something is off. Like one of my practical tips, right? Like there's so many like light ways. Yes, we can meditate, we can journal, but when I'm out and say I feel something is off and it's night and I'm in Medellin in Colombia and something is off, what do? Immediately call the Uber, get the hell out of there. I don't walk in parks at night. I don't, you know, like, you have to pay attention to your instincts for your own safety. And know when you meet people too, as you exercise that muscle of intuition, both in your own spiritual practices, maybe outside of it, but while you're traveling, you learn your body's signals. You learn who is cool and who is maybe not. Like, if you have any weird feeling towards someone, I'm just like, no, we're not even going to try it. We're not going to trust it. We're going to trust what feels good right now. You know, it takes more of a tangent, but you know, it's the reality.
It is, and it's a visceral reaction that is important to listen to, because it's, you know, if we go into like somatics, right? Like, it is your body having an experience. And if you take a moment to just breathe into what that experience is and feel, is it tight? Oh, maybe it's actually loose. Like, to actually kind of name those things and then say, and what's the first thing that I want to do? Something that I do, and I literally just said this to one of my clients yesterday, is the practice of, is your body leaning forward, like something's a yes, or is your body leaning backwards? And it's a no. And we use this a lot of times in terms of like food, when we're moving through like food issues and whatnot. But this can also be something that I wasn't telling them that for food. I was telling them that for the people they were spending time with. And so that also plays into that nomad thing, where you're like, okay, but you might not know any of these people. And it's great to not know people and allow yourself the experience to be like, I'm in full control of my life. And I think that's something that I would love for you to just like give us any like experience that you want to talk about or words of wisdom in terms of like there is magic in being like, holy shit, I'm in charge of not just your day, but you're like, I can do what I want to do today and tomorrow and in 3 weeks from now. But a lot of people that don't travel for longer periods of time, they just go on vacation. When I try to have that conversation with them, I can see that there's a disconnect in the, yeah, but you have to go do A, B, C, X, Y, Z. And so like just anything that intuitively comes out for you when I've said that. Cause I feel like for me, I've been like, yeah, well, when I lived in Staten Island full time before I like ever left, of course I had to go to work and I had to, and you feel compelled to do the things that the people around you are fucking doing. But once you start traveling, you start realizing, actually, no, you can do whatever the fuck you want. And that's a
Mhm.
beautiful thing. So yeah, I would love to hear like what you have to say
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah, there are literally zero limitations. I thought, like I said, that going into nomad life, it felt like such a pipe dream.
Mm,
It felt so far away. I had no idea the how. I had no idea. Like I said, in my head, it was like, okay, this is reserved for the wealthy 1%. This is not something I could do. Even something like being online on Instagram. I shared about this in my weekly newsletter today. That didn't seem like a space that I could occupy. And the thing I often think about to help this is actually kind of going back in time. Like I always say to one of my friends, I'm like, all this came from an idea.
mm-hmm,
I just had an idea and I just started going for it. And this was 6, 7 years ago when I just felt, I was fresh out of college. I had this great job. I was living in New York. I was like, I'm going to be this fashion girl. And I had this idea because I was not happy in that job. I quit that job. Would not recommend. I mean, another thing. Okay, it was chaos, but okay, listen, it was hard. Wouldn't recommend just like completely quitting like your job and like fully going for
mm,
it, but I figured it out. Um,
mm,
However, I started my blog at that time just as a creative, as an artist myself, as someone who wanted a fulfilling life. And I just thought, let me just share about this. At first I shared it very quietly. And then things started kind of picking up pace. And because at the time I ended up getting multiple other kind of part-time jobs and still developing my career in fashion and marketing as I was building out this blog. Um, but I still could do whatever I wanted. Like I still could do whatever I wanted with
mm,
that blog. I remained open. I remained curious. It went through a YouTube channel phase. It went through, right? My Instagram has been built over the years. My weekly love letters came to be in 2020. The blog turned into a love letter. I
mm-hmm,
think the biggest thing to know is like you can create anything you want. It just comes from an idea and just follow the flow. Just let yourself flow. It doesn't have to be this big thing you get to and you're like, I finally made it. Like I just hit the milestone I wanted of eventually finding an apartment in Mexico City. It was miraculous how this happened. I actually, a few months ago, thought I was getting my ass back to the States. I was like, maybe it's not time. I don't know. But I remained open. I remained curious. I kept manifesting it every day. I
mm,
was thinking about what could my apartment not only look like, but what would it feel like?
feel like,
What would it feel like with Nomad Life back in 2020? What would it feel like to live in this space of freedom? What would it feel like to build a coaching business? What would it feel like to be stable? What would it feel like, right? It's not about what it looks like. It's not about the how. It's about how do I want my life to feel?
mm-hmm,
And so I feel that that is a liberating concept and an empowering way to think about life, whether you are nomading, whether you are building a business, whether you are whatever it is, just feel it. How do you want it to feel? How does your life get to feel?
mm-hmm, mm,
Take care of the things you got to take care of, pay the bills, get the side gig, let yourself adapt, change, flow. My business has gone through, and I know you can relate to this, so many different iterations, chapters, pivots, I started as a spiritual like life coach. I moved into other things. I was doing sound healing for a while. I, kind of then started developing all like the style of coaching that I have now, more practical habits and mindset stuff, and over time, just recognizing that I can do this, I can create whatever online, I can create my own story segments, I can create a weekly love letter. I'm going to commit to that and see what happens. What has come from it? It's the most lucrative place of engagement in my business. It's a place I've been able to connect with so many beautiful people. It's a place where I get to share my heart. That's just the newsletter. Like I want everything in my life to feel fucking amazing. So, like how let's just do it. Let's just play. You know what I mean?
I really just want to say, and I hope I'm not cutting you off, if you don't get Kelsey's love letters, they come out on Thursdays. They're absolutely fantastic. And they're when I used to watch my grandfather sit outside with his cup of black tea and he would be drinking his newspaper. That's what I get every week with your love letters. It's my version of the news because to me, the things that you're talking about today, that's the shit that's important to me in my life. Yes, what's going on in the world is also extremely important to me. And like taking in news like that is important. But yours, it's not a newsletter. It really is a love letter that really speaks to what we go through. And I really love everything that you're saying. And I also want to name that if you are listening to this, because I hope people are listening to this that aren't nomads either, because the work that you do and the practical pieces that you share, that I do have a question for you, but the practical pieces that you do share are important for everyone in their life. And I just said this recently a few weeks ago. I love that we have quote unquote regular people that come on our retreats. Like the last retreat we had, all of them were like, I mean, how normal can you be to trust us to come do plant medicine in the middle of the mountains?
How normal are we really? Yeah.
Right. But they're all like, they are all adults with children that have jobs. Like I would consider them like professionals that to the point where like no tagging them. This is something totally, it doesn't have to do with this, but I feel like when you do this type of work, and like everyone signs a waiver that says they're allowed to be in photos and videos at our retreats, but I don't tag anyone unless you tell me, like if you came on a retreat and you were like, Dan, tag me in everything that you always put out there because I want my Instagram to get out there. I would do that. But everyone that came on the last retreat was like, bro, I can't have work finding out that like, this is what I was doing with you guys. And I love that because I feel like sometimes people don't want to do the spiritual stuff, the quote unquote spiritual stuff, because they feel like they need to be wearing hemp pants and they need to be dancing like I do in the middle of the street for no reason, which it's not for no reason, but like they feel like they kind of have to have that. And that's why I've always loved having conversations with you because you've been so grounded in that. And so my question is, I would love if you could share about your Monday motivation. And what sparked that and like kind of where you pull all of those things from. Because I know that really speaks into the routines and habits that you brought up before. Do you feel like you had any teachers that were able to give you that beforehand, or did you cultivate that space from inside of you to give to your community?
Definitely I cultivated. I mean, of course, I've had amazing mentors. I would say the most notable mentor I had was my first year of nomad life. I worked with Danielle Mercurio, if you know who she is. She knows Shama Denani, who's another So Danielle Mercurio helped me in nomad life to just not necessarily create practical routines, but she really did help me. I worked with her more as a life coach. She was also nomadic at the time. And she's an astrologer, but we didn't really go that way. I wanted practical, like, how do I get through this? I don't know how to stabilize. So she definitely helped me a little bit in that way. Well, a lot in that way. But as far as routines, habits, all that has come from me. I mean, the thing is with Monday Wisdom, which I'll get into in a minute, and then the weekly love letters. And this is the trippy thing about being a coach or being a content creator. It's so weird to say that because I'm just sort of entering into that space more seriously, but having an online platform, you know, and it's so based around what I'm going through. Like Monday wisdom comes from me beginning to think on Sunday, okay, what is the big lesson? What is the thing that I need to hear that I'm going to share with my audience? And it's the same thing with weekly love letters, and that it's the same way that I started this with my blog. It was, this is what I'm going through. Does anybody resonate? Am I alone?
Mm.
And my goal from day one, which is a solid mindset tip, if you're ever looking to express your gifts online in any sort of way, or in person, whatever, you know, my goal has always been and will continue to be to impact one person positively. If I can do that, I've done my job. That was the goal with the blog. I don't care who sees it. It just needs to be one. I want to just make one person feel good, right? I don't need a massive audience. And I think that because I'm unattached to that, that has been crucial in my success of the creation of these little segments and weekly things. Now, as for the creation of how did Monday Wisdom start? How did Weekly Love start? It provides for me a structure as an entrepreneur to follow, right? Mondays are a day that I work on content. Tuesdays, I work on this other thing. Wednesdays are love letters day. Thursdays are usually creative projects or back end stuff. Fridays are finances or little meetings with collaborators and partners. I've had to establish this because while traveling, you know, it's not like I was just playing and having fun and backpacking. Like I had to be working. And I was writing through that whole thing. So Monday Wisdom, I think, started about a year ago. And that was because, you know what it was actually inspired by? There is a psychic medium named Nikki Novo. I don't know if you know who she is. She's cool. She's like half Latina mommy. She lives in North Carolina. I met her while I was assisting Danielle Mercurio on a retreat about 2 years ago. Nikki came in, they're friends, blah, blah. I started following Nikki. Shout out to Nikki Novo. She's really, really cool. She had a Monday readings segment where she would go on Instagram Live and share 2 messages. She still does this. She's very established. And, you know, I was looking at that and I was like, well, it would be really cool to share something weekly like that, because I think it helps cultivate community, right? Everything I do is like, yes, it's from the heart. There's also, though, some strategy, like we got to run the business, we got to make the money. Yeah. That said, I stand behind, you know, everything I do in the content space, especially, is very authentic. Like it very much comes from intuition, not so much like strategy. Yeah. So I was like, let me try this out. And again, it was experimental. It was to play. And people started really resonating with Monday Wisdom, which is, if you don't know what it is, every Monday I come on stories and share with you a mindset tip or a life hack to make your Monday a little less scary and to help your week flow easier. So that is the line that came out of it, because Mondays don't have to suck. Let's set you up for success. Let's get you inspired. And then whatever I'm going through, I literally just share. It's not that well planned out. Like it's sort of just like, great. And then it gives me also a way to share different announcements and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of how it started. I don't remember what else I was going to share about that, except, oh, another thing just that I feel called to share is, you, and maybe you can relate to this, you start to take signals from the outside world of like what's working and what's not. Like as I've noticed over the last 6 months when I've been out in Mexico City, or if I've been out in Seattle, which is kind of another home base, but less so than this one, people will come up to me and be like, I love your weekly love letters. I love your Monday Wisdom. It helps me a lot. And it's like, that's the point. It's not like a gimmick to get you to buy something. I'm rarely promoting or selling anything in those spaces. It's just to share because I want to, because I can and I feel it and it feels good, you know?
I always tell people, like, it means the world to me when people randomly run up to me, especially when I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
It means the world to me that you'll come up to me and be like, hey, you're Dan. And I'm like, I am Dan. Interesting. And then they'll say I listen to all of your with this Wolf Mother podcast, the meditations that I've put out on here, the amount of plays that they have is wild. And people will reach out and be like, I listen to this every day on my lunch break. I have a chick who she works at a law firm. She's a lawyer. And she's like, yeah, she's like, this meditation helps me so much. Just with the experience that you have being in a high stress environment. And I'm like, that's so sick. And I want people to know that creatives, we love that feedback. Cause I know that sometimes people are like, oh, like, I don't want to bother you. I don't want to overwhelm you. It will never overwhelm me. It will never bother us. It will always be like an affirmation for us,
Yeah.
that like, okay, so it's important for me to share from the heart. And I actually really love this because I do also want you to share a little bit in terms of, which you have been, in terms of business wise. And for me, that is something that I have like, so I am not, you have a background in marketing.
Yes.
You are like, you have lived 8,000 lives and it is so cool to witness.
So many lives. It's
Um,
hard to explain. Yeah.
so like for me, I really struggle with that piece of marketing and staying on top of it in terms of strategy. And I've paid many of the monies to work with people to help me with those strategies and help me with marketing. And yet I feel like for me, the best things that work, if anyone that's listening to this that is a creative that wants their stuff to get out there, the best thing that's worked for me is when I am really sharing like from my lived experiences. That's when I get the most people coming through the door. That's when I get the most people that are engaging with me in conversations like behind the scenes of the content. Because I also understand I talk about things that maybe people don't want to comment on the post and be like, yes, I've also been on antidepressants. Yes, I've also had an abortion. Like I
Yes.
get that. I get that.
Yeah.
That's totally fine. So I
Totally.
get a lot of behind the scenes DMs and emails of people talking to me about stuff, which is fine. But there is this piece, and I just anything that you maybe want to share from coming from that background of understanding that place, but now also evolving and growing and seeing like, especially in this nomad life, when I share what's fucking real for everyone, that's when I get those conversations going. So anything that you feel like you have to share on that topic.
Yeah, I completely agree. I always, especially when I was a little bit more shaky online, like I wasn't as experienced. I mean, I was experienced. The thing is, my experience is so divided because I've had the very masculine, rigid kind of traditional social media marketing for other brands where you're going through the analytics and you're doing a pretty strict strategy and you have a calendar and all, and the caption has to be perfect and it has to go through approvals. Like I've lived in that place, still occasionally will and do. And then, but not to that extent. I'm too busy. But but now, being in your own brand, it's different. Like I'm not analyzing my KPIs. I don't really care. I don't have the time for that either. And I would rather be talking to people and coaching and doing the other stuff I'm doing. So, but I have, especially when I was shaky in the beginning, now we're coming back around. I'm the most like long-winded storyteller ever. So apologies. So I would bless my posts. Like I would just send a little prayer out with them. Just trust they're going to reach the right people, especially when I was starting out, especially when I was in the blogging space. I would talk about it on Facebook. Hey guys, new blog post. I was a little bit, like I said, I was a little mousy, which I think is normal. You're trying to understand and dip your toes into this realm. And even with my marketing experience, I still didn't know how to stand in my own brand. I didn't know I could do that. Nobody gave me permission. I had to give that to myself. And so blessing your posts, yeah, feeling aligned in that way. I mean, it's the same. If I have launched like the self-care challenges or the daily routines courses that I've done, honestly, I can tell if it feels right and I do it, it will go well. If it doesn't feel right and it feels like I'm forcing it because maybe I need the money or I would need the clients or whatever it is, then things get messed up. Right now, I'm moving out of the group coaching space. I've just learned that I really love one-on-one work, if anything. So that's a little bit different. But as far as social media tips go, something that can help is don't take it too seriously. Like really, not a lot of people, not as many people are paying attention as you think.
Yes.
Like if you're launching an offer, right, you have to Like
Mhm.
people will respond to a flyer with like the times and the dates of an event, and they're like, "What time is it?" And you're like, "Okay." So, right? It's we all do it because our attention spans are nothing. So don't take it too seriously. You know, set yourself up for success by just deciding. Like I like to work with clients on like energy percentages. Like
Mhm.
how much of your percentage of energy needs to go to social media? Right? For
Mm.
me, right now, it's probably at like 40-50 because I'm moving into the influencer space. But before, it was 15-20%. You
Mhm.
know, I show up, I have my Mondays, like choosing days that you're going to focus on it. Just remembering that there's more to life outside of it,
Mhm.
trusting people to find you. Um, and just having fun with it, letting it be an exploration of you finding your own voice and your own brand if that is what you want. And you don't have to be an influencer to do that. You could
Mhm.
do that in other ways without having, you know, the persona behind your brand if you're selling a product or if you're selling whatever. So that's what I would say about that is like it's really not that big of a deal.
Mm.
And the second you let go of feeling like, oh my God, it matters how many people like my post, I don't pay attention to that. I go on, I create more than you consume. I create,
Mhm.
I leave. That's
I
it. I
love
have
that.
conversations, I leave. Like it's
Mhm.
not, this isn't a space I try to spend too much time in consuming unless it's
Mhm.
for inspiration purposes.
So I'm actually going to take this and I'm also going to loop this back to nomadic stuff. So these are
Yeah.
conversations that I feel like I have. This is why you and I don't shut the fuck up when we talk to each other.
We could go 6 hours. I love this.
I,
I feel like we're
I
hanging
know.
out.
So for me, a conversation that I have with clients, because I have the people that either do travel or want to travel. I have the people that do have a business or want to create a business. One, everything that Kelsey is saying in terms of people don't really give a fuck. People really don't give a fuck about what's going on. Like you are, and I always teach you, you're the center of your universe, which is why that's a teaching that you need to take into everything. You are the center of your world, which is so beautiful. You should be the center of your world. But that means you think everyone else is spending so much time thinking about you, but they're not, because at the end of the day, they are the center of their universe. So to relate that back to when I talk to people about um, moving abroad, or they're like, I just want to travel and I'm going to travel for 6 months. You said something so important. Create more than you consume. And I find that people that want to get into nomad life, which this makes sense. My ex, when he wanted to live in a van and he wanted to travel in a van, the amount of YouTube videos that we fucking watched like weekly of people that lived in their vans and then people rebuilding their vans and then people doing that, like you just take all this stuff in, and I get it. You do have to look into what you want to do, but then there comes a point where you need to stop. And my
Mm,
new thing has been telling people, which is something that I've been doing, is just delete the app off your phone and then download it for a certain amount of hours every day. So I have been doing my best that for a certain amount of hours it's on there and then it's gone again, so that you can focus on what's in front of you. Because if you do want to travel, and I am also guilty of this, especially when I was sick in the hospital in Mexico. I was devastated. I'm scrolling on Instagram. I'm sitting there all hooked up to everything. And
totally.
look at all these people living their beautiful life. And I'm sitting here and I can't eat and I can't drink and I can't freaking see. And like there were just like you can spin yourself out and create a narrative that I'm not going to have the experience that that person has. I'm not going to have the business that that person has, because you're going to like some people's social media, bro. It's curated beautifully. Shout out to them. It looks gorgeous. But I know this with people that are also nomadic, that are in kind of the same business that we are. I know it for a fact because I've been in community with them. The post that they're putting out looks beautiful, but I know exactly what's going on behind the scenes. One, that amount of money that maybe they're inferring that's coming in, it's not coming in.
Totally.
The videos and photos that you're seeing of these beautiful places, yeah, they probably saw it, but it's not as pretty on a day-to-day basis as you're thinking. We're getting rushed out of places because we move into a place and we're like, fuck, it smells like mold in here. I have to get the
Right.
fuck out of here. But you might have been like in a really beautiful spot. Like when I was all the way down in Bacalar, I
Mm,
loved it. It was so beautiful. It has like the lagoon of 7
yeah.
colors. It's so gorgeous. But the house that we had mold. And
Oh, yeah.
so we had to come up with a strategic plan where, we had signed a lease and now we were like, hey, like we are not like we can't keep this lease going. Like, do you see what all of this is? And they were like, oh yeah, it's just an old house. And we were like, no, no, no. So now we have to prove that this is mold because we need the
Right.
lease to be broken. So like just because you're seeing certain things, whether it's nomad life or business life, you don't know everything. You don't know everything.
Yeah, you got to stay in your lane. You got to stay in your lane regardless. You have to decide what kind of nomad you want to be, right? Like I said, like
Mhm.
I wasn't like a backpack. There were like the 19-year-old
Yes.
from England, like backpacking around, like don't even have a phone. There were the digital nomads in the tech space that were, staying in really nice
Yes.
hostels and like drumming on their keyboard. Like I was somewhere in between that. And it's the
Mhm.
same thing with business. It's the same thing with any aspect of your life. You have to decide your path. And
Yeah.
it is so liberating when you decide not to give a shit about what other people think. Because here's the thing, yeah, people, maybe I'm sure I've been canceled multiple times online. Whatever. It comes with the territory.
Yeah.
Like whatever. Like
Mhm.
there might be people talking shit about me, right? I'm sure
Mhm.
there are. But there are also people, and this is the thing that I
Mm.
also think about a lot. You always have silent fans. Like you said,
Yes.
most people don't say things to creatives or whatever. Like I have like not said like, oh my God, I love your content to some people that I watch and follow. I try to, but listen, it's life.
Yeah, it happens.
It happens, but there are likely more, just like likely more people than you think cheering you
Mhm.
on, saying
Yeah.
beautiful things about you behind your back. Wow, they're so kind. You know, I really admire what they're doing. I wish I could do that.
Mhm. Mhm.
There are people saying that too. And regardless, it doesn't matter. It's your life. You get to
Yeah.
choose it. You get to live it. You get to decide it. You get to write the chapters. You get to be your own hero on this journey. And the most beautiful thing you can do for yourself, and the most beautiful journey I've been on in my entire life, has been nomad life, because it has been a super highway to me understanding without anything remaining the same.
Mhm.
Everything is temporary. These big universal truths, right? The most important thing that I've learned is just to be my own best friend, show up for myself, let it flow. When I'm in my downfalls, when I've had bad income months with business, when things have fallen apart, when hostel rooms I've booked have been, for whatever reason,
Yeah.
canceled. Mold in the apartment. There's cockroaches in my apartment. There's all these things that you're always dealing with, but that's just life.
Mhm.
Nomad life is
Right.
just life on steroids. And it really just teaches you how to, yeah, how to care for yourself and how to
Mhm.
show up for yourself and
Yeah.
have this beautiful adventure along the way, which is the whole point of life
Yes.
anyway, spiritually or otherwise. It's to be
Mhm.
on that journey and to be present with it, right?
100%. I'm going to say one thing and then we're going to wrap this up. And I've got that one last question for you.
Okay.
To speak to that piece of being canceled and people talking shit about you.
Yeah.
There is a comedian, his name is Tom Segura, and some people that are going to listen to this are probably going to remember when this happened. Tom Segura and his wife took one of my Instagram reels of me talking about my period blood
I
and
remember that.
and they talked about me on their podcast and like not in a positive way at all. It was, but, and I didn't care because when I looked at the comments on that podcast video, of course they were all like, that girl is disgusting. That's so gross, all this stuff. However, in my mind, I was like, all right, for every 9 people that were like, yo, that chick is gross, there was one person who was like, wait a second. You're saying that I can touch my own period blood and I'm not gonna vomit or freak out or like disintegrate into nothing like that. And that happened in 2020. So that was something for me that like I all and that by the way, that reel, like it didn't do like it didn't go viral or anything. So to this day, I still have no idea how. Like, I don't know if they were just
Yeah.
Googling stuff or like trying to find something to talk about. But regardless, in my mind, I've always said that for every 9 people that talk shit about me when I do my wild dancing and I teach my classes, there's one person that's like, damn, actually, when I did what she said, I felt a little bit
Yeah, like
better.
words.
Yeah. So there really is so much to everything that you have just said today. Like there is so much truth to what you have spoken. I would love for anyone that's listening to this to let us know what else you want to learn from her, because there's so much more that I didn't ask, because I want you guys to just listen and get like the surface level. And then we want to know what questions that you have to bring in. So my last and final question for you, and I'm just going to take a deep breath before I ask,
Hmm.
is what is one word that we can send like a little prayer for you, that word that you're working on, but also it's a word that everyone that's listening to this can also, bring into their life.
Hmm. Prosperity.
Prosperity. I love that. I
Yeah.
love prosperity over abundance.
Yeah, me too. Lately, I'm vibing with it. I'm like,
Yeah.
let's go farther. Let's go bigger.
Yes.
You know, we get so used to the final thing I'll say before we wrap up too is like we get so used to, even with nomad life, I got so used to being in this nomad flow for 3 years.
Hmm.
Before that, I was used to the New York fashion girl flow for 10
Of
years,
course.
right? Like we have our little chapters. It's so easy to find a comfort zone there. Of course, nomad life at first was not comfortable, but then I found a flow in it
Mhm.
and it felt good. But then I was like, okay, suddenly I want more. What else is here?
Yeah.
This wasn't the main goal. This wasn't
Mhm.
the only goal. So, it's just, I think prosperity is a reminder that like you get to go bigger, you get to
Mhm.
go farther, you're worthy of more. I'm in this stage of my life now where I'm like, okay, I'm 30 years old. I'm like, we got to, fix some mistakes from our 20s. We have an apartment in Mexico City, and now we're moving from nomad life back to stationary life. What does that look like? Who am I? Who do I want to be in this? What kind of influencer do I want to be? How do I navigate the coaching realm now? All these questions we're always asking, asking, asking. And it's like prosperity. I think I want to send that prayer out to anybody who feels like
Mhm.
maybe stuck, or maybe they're like, I'm not sure what to do. Don't worry about it. It gets to get better.
Mhm.
It gets to be fluid. It gets to be stable. It gets to be amazing for you.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's what I'll share.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you to those of you that have shown up live on Instagram, that watched us record this episode. Today is the solstice, so many blessings, whether it is the summer solstice for you or like it is for me, it's the winter solstice. Many blessings to you and to yours. Leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening on so that we can know what else you would like to learn on these topics, because between the both of us, there's so much more that we could say. Kelsey, you're wonderful. You're beautiful. I'm so grateful that I've been able to connect with you for so many years. And thank you so much for carving the time out of your day to have this conversation. I love you.
Thank you so much. I love you too, Jen. I'll talk to you soon. I appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.